Welcome to stormTRacker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Well, what an incredible season it was for the Carolina Hurricanes, winning the Stanley Cup after a 20-year hiatus. But the celebration was short for Eric Tulsky and his staff as they jumped right into the draft, free agency, and trade season. If the Canes want to continue as reigning champion, there's still work to be done, according to Canes GM Eric Tulsky. Did the Canes pull off their usual magic in the draft? Which players have departed the Canes, and which players have been added? What's the plan for Alexander Nikishin, and what's next for Jesperi Kotkaniemi? And will the Canes jump into the restricted free agent pool with a surprise move? Joining me as always to break it all down, our hockey savants here at stormTRacker, Erin Manning and Katie Bartlett. Ladies, lots going on.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay, so, what's Eric going to do? He's been a little bit quiet. We'll talk about what he has done so far, but, he's the wizard and he's always working on something. But before we get into that, I thought we'd have a little bit of fun. Last summer, we decided to take a look at the roster and kind of give our idea what the point totals would be for the players. And it's kind of fun because, as it turns out, we got a lot of them right. So good for us. That's great. A couple of things surprised us. Erin, anything for you?
Well, I think that we had all decided that, the player who would end up in the 90-plus bracket, if anybody did, would be Sebastian Aho. And it was because, he got pretty close in the last couple of seasons. He's been pushing above 80 and really putting up more points on the board, both goals and assists. He's had a couple of seasons in his career where he's come very close to a 40-goal season. He has not done that yet, but we thought maybe this would be the year, and that would certainly drive forward the rest of his production. Unfortunately, I believe Aho, did he end with exactly 80? I think that was it.
Yes.
He fell a little short of our expectations in the grand scheme of things, especially with, his name on the Stanley Cup. That doesn't matter a whole lot. But it just is, I think it serves as a reminder that the Canes don't have to have a superstar level scorer. They don't have to have a 100-point guy. They don't have to have someone who is going to produce at that level in order to be the team that they are, the champions. So that's just a reminder to all of us that, when you look around the league and you say, gosh, this team's got guys that are putting up 90 and 100 points, a lot of it has to do with the character of the Canes, how they play, and even just little things about how ice time is allotted in the bottom six, because Rod Brind'Amour gives his bottom six more ice time than the average coach does. So all of that comes together to show that this is always a team effort and it's always a group effort. I think that there's some of us that believe that Aho has that level of scoring in his game, but it isn't the biggest priority. It's playing that two-way game, that 200-foot game that allows the Canes to do so much of what they do. So that was interesting that we were kind of gung-ho that he'd get to that 90-point level. I still think he's got a 90-point season in him sometime. Maybe it'll be this one. Well,
we talked about the role he played in the playoffs, and he wasn't a big offensive contributor, but his ability with his line to shut down some of the top lines in the other teams was critical. So very, 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 very smart on that one for sure. Katie, anybody surprise you from that list?
On the positive side, I was just revisiting the list, and I saw that Sean Walker had 31 points, which technically puts him up in the tier above.
Yes.
And he is not somebody that we typically associate with being a point producer, but he had himself a very tidy, good little season. And you know me, Sean Walker is one of my favorite Canes, one of my favorite role players. And so I've always got to shout him out whenever I have the opportunity to do so. So I love the fact that he exceeded expectations in that category, especially with all of the different roles he played in other facets on the PK or whatever, and then how that pairing with Miller really came about and became one of the Canes' feathers in their cap during the playoff run. On the not so great side, I know there's a whole lot of caveats, but to another defender, I think we all kind of expected a little bit more from the point side from Jacob Slavin. Not that he is a Shane Gostisbehere where that is his role, but in the past he has produced even if it's mostly secondary assists, that sort of thing. And like I said, there's some caveats there, but he did play almost half the season and still was in single digit points. And so I think that Slavin definitely expects more from himself, and that should rebound hopefully next season with a healthy season and in the different situations that he plays in. So I think those were the two that stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Walker, as we heard in the playoffs, the broadcasters were incredibly enamored with Sean. He's kind of stepped up to be a player that is getting a lot of notice now, and he, along with K'Andre Miller, they were outstanding for the Canes. I have to mention Jesperi Kotkaniemi. We had him at 45 to 59 points. Not quite for him. He ended up with 9. Oh, man. I think that's a big goose egg for us on that one.
Well, if you'll remember, Tom, when we were talking about that last year, I said that he would get around 45 points if he was traded. And I still believe that he will end up in that 40 to 45 point center range if he is played and deployed like a third-line center with third-line center ice time and consistent line mates. It didn't happen this year. It's never happened with the Canes. It's more than time to move on. So I look at that and say, it's not something, you can't look at the deployment that he got this year and say you would ever expect 45 points from somebody who had his deployment.
No. And
there we are.
That's fair. That's fair enough. And I think, there's, again, a lot of caveats. He only played 42 games. So, but we had certainly higher hopes than 9 points for him, even if he remained a Cane. So that I think is a tough one for us. And we'll talk about Kotkaniemi in a few minutes, of course, as we look at some of the things that are going to happen with the Canes. Switching gears and starting to talk a little bit about what's happened so far. Obviously, Eric Tulsky and Darren York and the rest of the crew have been extremely busy with all that's gone on. And it kicked off in Buffalo with the draft. You remember, Erin, you and I talked about this. We had a little bit of fun saying, I think this is going to be a boring draft. We only have 4 picks. And of course, we wanted to sit back and I said, hey, what are we going to do with 31, right? Are we going to trade that, keep it? What do you expect? And what happened, Erin?
Well, of course, they traded it. And that was kind of one of those things that I think, as most of us Canes fans have learned, don't bother watching the draft on the first day unless there's a strong target like Bradley Nadeau was. That there's not going to be someone the Canes are going to use that pick somewhere in the low 20s to high 30s to pick. They're just not going to. It was amazing, though, that they parlayed those draft picks into as many as they did.
Yes.
They went from having 4 draft picks in the entire draft to having 7, and they selected 6 players. And we'll talk about what they did with that other one in a minute. But it's incredible that, they play that game because they absolutely do turn their draft capital into, an advantage for them. Because as a lot of people know, the further down you get by about the middle of the second round, you're talking about players that have a very slight chance of ever touching ice in the NHL. You might as well maximize that chance with quantity, and not just be, enamored of a player that you have to pick at those lower draft levels. That's something that Tulsky does very well, and it's kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, and this was a little bit of a different draft for us because there weren't any Russians selected. So that's kind of unusual for the Hurricanes. They usually are loading up on Russian prospects, and we didn't see any at all, which is kind of interesting. Again, I think, it was what we expected. They picked up some players that, are a little bit under the radar, some prospects that folks aren't necessarily thinking about. And of course, as you mentioned, they did parlay one of those draft picks, the 123, I think it was, which was in the 6th round for them, was part of the deal for John Carlson. We'll talk about Carlson in a minute. Katie, did you see anything at the draft that said, hey, wait a minute, this is interesting? Was there anything that caught your attention?
No.
No, it's fine. Maybe not. It's not a loaded question.
I did actually stay up, even though I was on vacation, for the draft, just to see the Canes turn that into 2 second-round picks, being the most predictable thing. Look, the most interesting thing was that final pick, which, nothing ultimately came of the Carlson situation, but it does show that Tulsky and his group have some, let's call it unorthodox methods to how they approach trying to get talent and trying to acquire talent.
Yes.
The 2 goalies at the end, I think it seems like the past recent drafts, there's always been at least one, if not more, goalies, so they're keeping that pipeline open. But it's just, when you say interesting, it seems like business as usual when it comes to the draft for the Canes. It's their picks, they have their role, what they become come the future, I don't know, but it was just a very straightforward, predictable draft from the Canes, and yeah, why not? They're Stanley Cup champions. They don't need to be doing anything crazy.
No, exactly. And, I did watch day 2, and I know that's probably surprising, but I did. And they did draft at number 51, and this got a lot of attention from the folks in the broadcast, William Hakansson. And this guy, he's a big player. He's 6'4", 207. And the thing about William, he came in at 51. But, some of the folks that were, fairly well known as far as the mock drafts had him quite a bit higher. Sam Cosentino of Sportsnet had him at 21. Jason Bartlett, 22. These guys were both on the broadcast. And, of course, when he pops in at 51, they're saying, oh, this is a heck of a move for the Canes. This guy's almost, NHL ready. And Darren York said this. He said, William Hakansson is a player we've known very well, playing in the international events and in Sweden. Big, rangy defenseman that skates well and has nastiness. We want our defenseman to be able to hold tight gaps and play fast defensively, and he fits that style of play perfectly. Yeah, I mean, they raved about this guy. And they said, hey, a steal for the Canes. This guy has definitely NHL potential written all over him. So, the Canes continue their trend to get these big hulking defensemen. Most of them are Russian right now, but here's a Swede to add to the mix. So it's kind of fun. So yeah, not a huge day, but I think Hakansson has some potential. The other guys, not so much, but we'll see how it plays out. Sometimes these guys, as we've seen with players like Yoel Nystrom, is a good example. Later in the draft and come along and play some NHL for you. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the winds of change in terms of player departures. As I start this off, I spent a lot of time covering the Chicago Wolves last year, and certainly at the end as we watched them in their run to the Calder Cup and trying to finish that off for the Canes organization. And there's some players that left now that I think it's kind of sad. They were great players. Dominic Fensore, I mean, I talked about Dom all the time, and I think he's a great player. Really enjoyed Dom. Ryan Suzuki, he was on stormTRacker. He was on a podcast with Andrew and Aldi and I, and a great guy, and he's gone. Dom headed off to the Colorado organization. So over to you on that one, Katie. And Ryan is headed to the Ottawa Senators organization. Is probably earmarked for Belleville next year. So he'll be closer to his brother, which is great. Giovanni Smith has gone over to the KHL, to Shanghai. So we'll see how he does with that team. That's kind of fun. Noah Philp was a tough loss as well for the Wolves. Philp was absolutely a beast in the playoffs. He was incredible. And I actually felt like he should get another shot in the NHL, if not with the Canes somewhere. And he's gone, headed over to Sweden to play over there with HV71. So he's gone. And Noel Gunler is gone as well. And he's signed over there as well. So a lot of players heading from Chicago. On the Canes side, Freddie Anderson. Katie?
Well, if you had asked me to make a prediction what was going to happen with Freddie Anderson this offseason, going to Edmonton absolutely would have been what I would have said. Because
wow,
with his availability issues, I didn't see him re-signing with the Canes. A lot of people talked about the, just warm fuzzies of bringing him back and running 3 goaltenders again, but you just can't realistically do that. And I think the Canes are confident enough that Kochetkov is going to be 100% ready to go at the beginning of the season, and they're ready to run with Kochetkov and Bussy. And so bringing back Anderson didn't make sense for the Canes. And then which team has just always been in the news cycle of we need a goalie, if only we had a goalie? That, of course, is the Oilers. So I'm not surprised he's there. I hope that he does well with that defense in front of him. I'm worried it's going to be a bit of a tough ride up there in Edmonton, but you still have all the goal support that offense is able to provide. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Oilers are winning, if it's a lot of 4-3, 5-4 type wins. But as long as he can do better than what they had before, I'm sure that the Oilers will be more than happy with that particular contribution. So we will miss Freddie. We loved our Great Dane, but all the best to him, except when playing the Canes or the Avs in
Well, of course, he's due to get married this summer, so I'm sure a lot of the Canes players will be at that wedding as well, so they'll get a chance to wish him well as well for with the Oilers. Now, you mentioned John Carlson, Erin. He was also one of the players that has departed a very short tenure in the Canes organization. Thoughts on the John Carlson situation all around, Erin?
I think it was a really interesting play, like you said, for them to be creative, think outside the box, and use that, very late draft pick that was probably not ever going to touch. Again, very, very rare for draft picks that late to make it. So why not? Why not use that to get the signing rights to Carlson? As far as the player himself goes, it would have been an interesting addition for the Canes. I think they still could use a right-handed defenseman somewhere down the line, and there aren't that many of them, and they usually cost a premium. So why not take the gamble, see if he's available? But I wasn't sold on Carlson's fit with the Canes anyway, so no loss.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was. My feeling on Carlson is, and I watched a lot of his play with Anaheim. I watched all their games in the playoffs and so on. He's a fine defenseman, don't get me wrong, and he's going to be a nice replacement for Radish, who's who ended up going to Toronto. He can go onto the power play and do that for Tampa. That's great. But the kind of game the Canes play, and it's demanding and it's fast and it's hard, is not his game. And so yes, they would have Slavin would have tried to cover for him or whatever the case was, but I'm not losing a lot of sleep because we didn't sign John Carlson. In any case, so those are the players gone. And, we expected Anderson. Carlson wasn't really part of the team. So far, there's really not much to change in terms of the Canes lineup. And we actually didn't expect any because most of the Canes are already signed on to long-term deals. So, there wasn't going to be a lot of movement. So the new arrivals and re-signings has been kind of, I guess it's been insignificant in some ways, or underwhelming is probably the right word for it. We had Nicolas Deslauriers who signed at the big event, and that was great in 2 years, and we all love Nicolas. That's wonderful. He's not going to move the needle for us much. Juuso Välimäki was signed to another year, and it's a one-way deal, which is interesting, and I think he may be earmarked for that number 7 defense spot, and that would be great because he was outstanding with Chicago. And I think the big question with Välimäki was really, could he rebound from another serious injury? And he did that in spades. So I think he would be outstanding as that number 7 guy, and that's great for him. Couple of signings for Chicago. Alexei Himasalmi was announced today. He's been a defenseman with the Wolves, and sometimes they're number 7 guys. So he gets to move up a little bit, I think, with the moves they're making. And Zach Sawchenko, who's interesting. Look, he's an American Hockey League goaltender. He's not going to see the light of day with the Hurricanes. but he's a good guy to back up in Chicago. He actually played with the Wolves 3-4 years ago, which is kind of fun. And also, he had played in collegiate hockey in Alberta with Lethbridge when Spiros Anastas was coaching the University of Alberta team. So it was kind of fun that they probably knew each other from back in those days as well. So he's earmarked for Chicago. Really nothing for the Canes so far.
Nope.
Surprising?
I think we were kind of hoping that there might be something a little bit more interesting to go on just to have something to talk about. But I don't know that, I don't know that it would make it surprising. This is a Stanley Cup winning team. These players won the cup together. So you are not, the front office isn't going to go just do a bunch of signings and trades just because. They've got to have a purpose. They've got to make the team demonstrably better. And so far, that opportunity has not come up at the price point that the Canes are comfortable with. So why make a move if you don't have to?
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think, when you looked at the free agent list, the UFA list, unrestricted guys, not really too impressive this year. So I didn't see them rushing out to get players, at noon on free agent day, the first. I thought they might sign a few players for Chicago simply because they've done this in the past. Maybe a veteran defenseman, maybe some other experience that could join the Wolves and help mentor the young players. But they haven't done that yet either. So if we look at the remaining unrestricted free agents, Skylar Brind'Amour, he's sitting out there, Josiah Slavin and Mike Riley. Any of those folks would you like to see return to the Canes, Erin, or to the Wolves, either one?
I think any of them, I would say that my gut instinct is telling me that Mike Riley is probably going to be moving on. The typical pathway, it seems like, for a lot of the NHL front offices is that they have this big flurry right after the free agency. You've got these guys, these depth players that are still on the list.
Yes.
And those guys, typically, to me, they get signed between mid-July and mid-August when they're really kind of filling out those rosters, looking for those depth players, those seventh defensemen and 13th forwards and so on. And we haven't reached that stage yet. And I think what's interesting about that is I feel like that stage has been delayed just a little bit by the, and I know we're going to maybe touch on this a little bit later, but by the double offer sheets that we had with Barrett Hayton being offer sheeted by the New Jersey Devils and by the bigger one with Leo Carlsson and I know, like I said, we're going to talk about this, but what happened because of those offer sheets being signed is that I think teams were waiting to see what was going to happen because especially in the Carlsson situation, whichever team ended up with Carlsson, they're going to have to move out some players. They're not going to be able to keep everybody they've got. And that means there might be somebody a little bit more intriguing to add to your roster than the people that are on the UFA list on Puckpedia. So I do think that all of these guys are going to find a home eventually. Now, the interesting thing with Skylar Brind'Amour is the Canes did not give him a qualifying offer. So if they sign him, it will be a brand new contract with, under new terms. Yes. And Josiah Slavin, I believe, I can't imagine why they wouldn't re-sign him and bring him back to Chicago, but, perhaps he wants to move on. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and Katie and I talked a little bit about that. And could he head out to Colorado and be closer to home and family? Sure, he could play with the Eagles next year and do that too. So maybe that's a possibility for him. I agree with you. I don't think Mike Riley's coming back. I don't see the point. And he's probably going to want to play somewhere. I mean, he hardly played last year. The other two guys would be Chicago bound. But I mean, Skylar Brind'Amour to me was a great depth center in Chicago. He could come up and play a few games if he had injuries or whatever, but we'll have to see how that plays out. On the restricted free agent side, Victor Neuchev, Caden Primo, Justin Robidahl, all from Chicago, and I know they've been tendered offers, so I expect they'll sign. Ronan Seeley, who I spoke a lot about last year, he had a tremendous season, won the Unsung Hero of the Year award for the Wolves. He was just incredible, I thought, in the blue. He filed for arbitration, which was kind of interesting. So we'll have to see how that plays out. It's possible that he wants to get noticed or he wants to become a free agent so he can go to another team. If the Canes don't match the arbitrators' price point, they can let him go and he'd be an unrestricted free agent. So we'll have to see what happens with Seeley. He's been around 4 or 5 years, so maybe that's what he's thinking on his side. The Chicago Wolves are kind of decimated, as I mentioned. They're going to be looking for some players for sure. And they even have some players that they had signed last year to the Wolves directly. Nikita Pavlichev, Evan Vierling were a couple of them. Pretty good players for Chicago. Don't know if they're coming back either. A couple of things that I think are interesting and getting a lot of attention, though, for the Canes because it's a quiet summer and there's not much to talk about. Of course, the big one is Alexander Nikishin. We've heard a lot about Nikishin. Is he going to be traded? Is he going to be re-signed? What kind of deal is going to happen? A couple of interesting things. As we took a look at the season as it unfolded for Nikishin, during the regular season, he was playing over 18 minutes a game, average time on ice. And he had some games where he played well over 20, when the injuries were taking place. Into the playoffs, he averaged 14.49, but he had 5 games under 13 minutes. So they were really sheltering him. Katie, what are your thoughts on Alexander Nikishin?
If he comes back, and I think perhaps I give it a slightly more likely chance that he does rather than gets traded. I think what he wants more than anything is he wants to see his role expanded. He doesn't want to be pegged into that third pairing role for a long time, and so he wants to see the path that even if he's back with Ghost again next season, that there is a way that he can assert himself and move up the lineup and get to that top pair, because that's what he was used to in the KHL. Obviously, the NHL is a whole different ball of wax, but he was the captain, he was the top pairing defenseman, he was the top power play guy, and he wants to know that he has the opportunity to seize those roles. The other thing that was a little off, I guess, about last season is the fact that we were also excited for Boom to come and join the Canes. But the one thing we just didn't see enough of was the boom, both when it came to the big hits as well as that huge shot. So that's another thing I would like to see if he comes back, is I want to see him lean more into that boom part of his game.
Yes.
And also hopefully not have the coaching staff prevent him or discourage him from leaning into that side of his game, because I do think it can be very effective. Obviously, he needs to be careful with how he does it. He has had a couple of hard hits that he has been on the receiving end of and has kept him out, like in the playoffs. But
yes,
there is another level for him to get to for sure. How this all sorts out as far as contract, if he stays, will be very interesting. And I think in a lot of ways it will be telling of how the Canes view him for the future moving forwards. As, is he a cornerstone piece to their defense, or is he a temporary placeholder until they can find someone or something better? So that's in a offseason that has been very quiet and very uneventful so far. It is definitely the most interesting piece of chatter out there, is what is going to become of Nikishin.
Yeah, I mean, we had high hopes for Alexander Nikishin, of course, coming off his play in Russia. And, of course, I had covered a lot of his action with Nick Bass on the Canes prospect side, and it seemed like every month he was doing incredible things. And he, you might recall, we talked a little bit about the playing time he was getting, and he actually, in the playoffs, he would play over 30 minutes regularly on his team. I mean, it's incredible, right? He's a beast. And so sure, he comes over, and it's been quite a change for him. But, the first year for rookies, it's not surprising, right? They come in, they have to figure out the ropes. And he had several other challenges, of course, language and moving to a new country and learning the Canes system. I mean, come on, you want to load it up against a player. I think we did that for him. And, he most nights was outstanding. He played very well a good part of last season. So I'm of the group that really, thinks he's a guy that's going to take a major step forward with this next coming season and the seasons that follow. Erin, where are you on Nikishin? Do you want to keep him? Are you happy to move him? What's the deal?
I think that it's going to be interesting to see what they ultimately do. And I think that the Canes are one of those organizations that's not going to move a player just to move the player. You know, if they still feel like they have something here, they're going to try to convince him to sign and convince him to stay. And they have the upper hand because, you know, obviously, he's an RFA and he's not subject to an offer sheet. So they can take as long as they want. They can go past training camp if they want to. It's ultimately, that doesn't usually go well for teams. No. The Ducks did that with Trevor Zegras and ended up losing the players. Yes. So in the long run. So I don't think that they will do that. I think that they will try to hammer this out if they're going to. But having said that, I could see a situation where they come to a mutual parting of the ways, because I think that Nikishin may be, from some of the rumblings I'm hearing, and you guys have heard him too, and I know this is probably coming from the agent, he may be unsure if his game really fits the Canes because of how they play and because of how he plays. You know, he is one of these guys who thrives, like you said, on heavy ice time. The more he plays in an individual game, the better he gets in that game, in each game. So he's not somebody who's going to be looking at it and saying, well, I just have to pay my dues. I'll toil away on the third pairing until I'm not a rookie anymore and I can move up. He's going to be 25 in October. Yeah, he's not that much younger than some of these, and he's actually older than some of the guys like Stankoven and Blake. So if they're not seeing that potential in him now, or if they're saying, well, you have to learn to do it the right way first before we're going to trust you with this, or before we're going to trust you with that, he doesn't have as much time as they do to waste waiting for the Canes to decide if he's their kind of player or not. And I mean, we have the recent history. We have Marty Necas. How many years did Marty Necas spend trying to become a Carolina Hurricane before he became a Colorado Avalanche and is doing extremely well and thriving there? I don't think Nikishin, Necas was a lot younger when he started that journey. Nikishin is looking at this probably as, well, do I want to be 28, 29 years old and I'm still playing on the third pairing because I'm behind Slavin and Miller and I can't move up? And Rod won't play me on my off wing, because he doesn't like to do that. So these are questions that he's got to be asking and his agent has to be asking. So I would not be surprised if he was moved. I think you've hit something which is interesting. I mean, there are some decisions that are going to come on the blue line in the next year. Okay, because we have Shane Gostisbehere and we've got Jalen Chatfield, whose contracts are up. So, something has to happen with those guys. And I think that's, if they're going to keep those guys, I think that's fine. But if as an example, Shane Gostisbehere is going to move on, they're going to need a power play quarterback. And here's the guy that can do it for them. So, there's a lot of moving parts here. And for sure, they would be happy to move Nikishin. It's a business. If they get something in return. And the big thing is, what can they get in return for Alex Nikishin? And, can they make it worthwhile to give up a player of that with that significant potential that he has? Sure. I think it's tough. I mean, you can go up and down, the NHL rosters all you want. You're not going to find the players. It's hard to find them. And, I just don't see a deal that makes sense. I mean, you hear about crazy things. The Rangers thought they were going to do a deal for Nikishin. Who are they giving up? They haven't got anything. St. Louis. And we keep hearing about guys like Jake Neighbors and other places. Come on. You're wasting my time. So, where are these deals that are going to be made for a guy like Alex Nikishin? Well, that's part of the process. I think Tulsky would like to find out what people are going to offer, because you want to see that. But I also think that, when you look at the whole situation, it's one of those things where, if they're going to trust him to take Ghost role on the power play in another season or two, then they need to trust him with the second unit. They need to give it to him and not constantly pull him off the minute there's a little wobble, because, that's not part of the process. If you're constantly pulling the player out of the situation because it didn't go perfectly, then the message the player gets is, I have to be perfect. Yes. Or I'm not going to get this, and I can't make any mistakes. And then they start playing a lot more. Then you stop seeing the boom, right? You stop seeing the risk taking. You stop seeing the things that make that player that player. And that's what I think that they're looking at with this situation. And then the other thing too, and this is a big question, are the Canes going to try to maximize their chances of winning another cup in the Stahl and Martinook era? Because that era is coming to an end. They might move a player like Nikishin to get someone who's going to help them win now for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
I don't know who that would be, and like you said, those players are out there, but are the other teams willing to move them? Some of them they might be, because some of them are kind of closer to the end of their careers, and they need youth, and they need, they're rebuilding. So who knows? It'll be very interesting to see what they do.
Well, certainly watching Jordan Staal this year, I don't think we have to worry for a couple of years about Jordan.
Exactly.
But
that's the whole thing. Do they maximize that window?
Correct.
And if they maximize that window, they might not be wanting to wait for Alexander Nikishin to finish developing.
Well, I think you made a good point too, Erin, that we've seen this before where, a player got caught up in his knickers because, every time he did something wrong, he was pushed onto the bench or, they were doing different things to him. We know who that is, and that's just Barry Kokoniemi. And that leads us to an interesting part of the conversation is, what is the disposition of Kokoniemi? I mean, folks have been kind of thinking he's gone for a long time and we're not seeing anything. Katie, what's your thought on Jesperi Kokoniemi?
Well, we heard reports this summer that during the trade deadline last season that the Canes were offered a second or third round pick, something like that, for Kokoniemi, and they chose not to accept that deal. And they chose not to accept it because they recognized that they needed center depth. Thankfully, the Canes didn't have an injury bug to deal with during the playoffs, but what would have happened if Stankoven, Aho, Staal, or Jankowski had gotten hurt at some point? They need somebody to come in and play center, not just a forward, a center. And that's why they held on to KK, is because KK knows the system, he knows the players, he can come in and eat up those minutes if called upon. I think the Canes are in a similar situation moving into this next season. Is they have the cap space. They have tons of cap space. They don't need his $4+ million salary off the books in order to build their roster. Their roster's done pretty much and taken care of. So they have the luxury, if they want to say, there's not a lot of center depth out there in the league. So we're going to hold on to KK and keep him for ourselves in case one of our centers gets injured, or in case another team gets so desperate for a center that they are willing to give us enough back in return to make it worth our while to move him out. So I think the Canes find themselves in the luxury of being able to wait it out and see what happens and make the best decision for them. As far as KK is concerned, I know it's not ideal. I know he would prefer to be playing. I know he'd prefer to show what he has, but at least he knows this team. He's got friends on the team. You could find yourself in worse positions than what he's in, bringing home that particular paycheck and just still getting to hang out with Jarvie and Fishy and all of his buddies on the Canes. So it is what it is for right now. I think he will get moved eventually, but not until a team is willing to meet the price demands that the Canes are asking for him.
Yeah, and his name's on the Stanley Cup, so I think and he'll have his turn with the cup, which is always fun too. So
I think Katie's right overall, but the one thing that I would say is that the surefire clue, if it happens as a separate deal, if it doesn't happen all in the same deal, the surefire clue that they will be ready to move him is if they do acquire a depth center of some kind or make some other move at center. Now, I say depth center or other move at center because there are some people that still believe that if they, wish and pray hard enough that that Dylan Larkin will add the Carolina Hurricanes to his now 4-team list because he just added the Dallas Stars. I think it is highly unlikely that Larkin will add the Canes to his list, and I don't think that he will be coming to Carolina. But if, for instance, the Canes decided to or were able to make an acquisition of that type, then of course Kokoniemi would be one of the ones going out the door. But otherwise, if they pick up a depth center before the end of the season, that gives them the ability to make the trade without being in that same hole. Like Katie said, you can't have. No, I mean, you look at Chicago's roster right now; they definitely don't have anybody
that
can come up and fill in.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things, and I hate this in a lot of ways, but one of the interesting things out there is that there are some people who know the Canes pretty well that are speculating that Kokoniemi will start the season on wing because of Seth Jarvis being out, and that they will not actually bring in Nadeau and bring him up. And I would hate that from the Nadeau perspective because Bradley Nadeau needs to play. But I understand the thinking, because if you bring in Nadeau, where does he go? Does he go next to Aho and Svechnikov on the top line? Do you break apart the chemistry of Stankoven and Blake? Do you try to balance him opposite Jordan Staal with Nick Ehlers on the other wing? It is a problem that they would have to figure out. And having Kotkaniemi come in and slide in at wing on probably Stahl's line would probably be easier for them than moving all these other parts. So, because then they could just promote guys up the lineup. They could have Martinook up there. They could have Robinson up there. We know perfectly well that Aho plays well with those guys, and it would be fine for the early part of the season. We're probably talking about a month to 6 weeks. And that would allow teams to, hopefully see Kotkaniemi being able to play and make a little bit of an impact, so that they would be more inclined to go ahead and make that trade. I don't see it. I think it's a long shot that they would do that, but there's that haunting possibility, because we just don't know what their plans are for Nadeau. So that's where I'm with that.
Well, a couple of things. On Bradley Nadeau, no, he's coming up. He's going to get that spot. There's no question in my mind. He's earned it. He's done everything he needs to do.
Where do you put him?
It doesn't matter. He can go on the top line. He can go on the second line. It's fine. He's not going on the line with Stankoven, but he can go on the line with Staal, and he can definitely go on the line with Aho. He's totally capable of doing it. And here's the other thing about this. They have to start giving their prospects a chance to play. They're going to have a system where, there's no use being a prospect in the Canes system, because you'll never play on the Canes.
That's how it is on a lot of contenders, though.
He has earned the right. Mm-hmm. So I have every expectation he's going to be the guy. There isn't any world that I see Jesperi Kotkaniemi as that guy.
Well, he certainly won't be playing on the top line, but that's what I'm saying, is that they can move him around on wherever wing they want to put him on.
And let's talk about
Katie has
Dylan Larkin. No, I want to mention Dylan Larkin because the Larkin stories are crazy. Where would he play in the Carolina Hurricanes? There's no spot for him.
Well, he'd take 2C and Stankoven would move. That's
he's
what
not
would
moving.
happen.
There's no way on this earth he's moving after what he did last year. Are you kidding? There's no.
You never know.
No, he's not moving. And I actually told someone today on X, I said, there's no possible way that
Let's put it this way. It's not going to happen anyway.
No.
Larkin's not coming to the Canes, so we don't need to worry about it. But if the Canes got a center of that caliber, I don't think that they would have any problem saying, Stankoven, you're going to play wing for a season or two, and then when Staal retires, then everybody's back at center. So, if they could get a center of that caliber, they're not going to say no, because we have Stankoven. They're not.
But don't forget, for Larkin, he's number 3.
Yep.
Why would he want to come to the Canes and be number 3?
Well, he doesn't. He's not. We're not on his list.
He doesn't.
Katie, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that I'm worried that if Nadeau is the guy that comes up, is that Rod is once again going to give into his little pet peeves of, you can't put this rookie up in the lineup, so he's going to play Nadeau just like he did last season on the 4th line, because that's what he does. That's what Brind'Amour does. And that Nadeau is going to struggle because that's not his role. He's not a grinder. That is not the type of game he plays. If he gets brought up, he needs to be put in a situation where he has the opportunity to demonstrate what he is capable of. And that benefits the Canes in 2 different ways. The more I think about it, the more I think he should be on the Aho line, just because then you don't have to mess with the other lines. But that he would, like you mentioned, Tom, look really, really good with Staal and Ehlers, because what is Nadeau's best feature? It's that shot of his. And who is the best playmaker on the Canes? Nikolai Ehlers, when it comes to the pass and the vision and being able to find his teammate. And so the 2 of them could be really good, and it would be beneficial to the Canes, not only because of hopefully helping to bring the scoring that they're missing with Jarvis, but also if when Jarvis comes back and they decide that they don't have us. Well, first of all, they have to decide, yes, this is important enough to us, we need to find a way to keep Nadeau in the lineup, then they move somebody else. Or Nadeau has shown his value to the point where they can really get something that they need back, whether it's because of injury or fall off of play. Do they need a goaltender? Has something happened with the Bussy Kochekovs? situation, whatever. And then Nadeau becomes a much more valuable asset because he has proven that he can perform at the top level in the NHL and not just be a really promising star from the AHL.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a trade chip. They've got to do something with him. He can't go back to Chicago in my mind. There's just there's no world for him in Chicago. And, interestingly enough, I don't know if you saw this, but in the playoffs, he was getting a lot of coverage. So it was much tougher for him to get that big shot off. And guess what he did? He was getting a ton of assists. Like he was setting up plays left, right, and center. And he led the Wolves in assists and points in the playoffs by quite a margin. So, I mean, he's a guy that can adapt to whatever's going on, and that's why I'm very bullish on Bradley Nadeau. He's definitely got to be playing for the Canes or somewhere. And it brings up a question. So if the Canes are going to strengthen, and I believe there's two positions that if they were ever going to do anything, to me, these are the positions that might come up. And one of them is a top six winger. Okay, we've got Jarvis out for a while. I think they're in a situation they could move Martinook down if they did get a top six winger. I think that's fine. And the other is goaltender. And, we're hearing discussions of, hey, the Canes would like to include Kotkaniemi and Nikishin in the same deal. Okay, so trying to find a way if they're going to move Kotkaniemi and can't get anything, just on his own, can they parlay that into something by adding him to Nikishin? Are there any players that jump out at you that you say, wait a minute, well, okay, if we're going to send those guys, here's someone I would like to see the Canes pick up?
I know you're not big on this person, Tom. We've had this discussion many, many times. But just like the talk with Nadeau and why he'd be a good match with Ehlers is we have a lot of playmakers on the Canes and not a lot of guys who shoot first and pass second. And so if there was a world in which the Canes could convince the Dallas Stars to trade Jason Robertson, that is a player I would love to see. I know what has been said in the past as far as his skating. He does have a good 200-foot game, though. He does have really good metrics when you go and look under the hood as far as that's concerned. He does play a high possession game, which works in the Kane system. He would need to be paired with a player or two that would be more of the board battle, get in the corner type of player. But he finds the soft ice in the middle of the ice. He knows where to go to be able to be found by his line mates and be able to get high quality scoring chances. And he does shoot. He is a really good goal scorer. He had 45 goals last season, 96 points. Now, do we expect him to get those kinds of totals with the Canes if he were to join us? No. But he would still get quite a few. He could get 40 still. He could probably he'd still have over 80, maybe even 90 points. And he's got one more very good year on that contract, and the Canes could spend that year trying to convince him to extend, or if Dallas wants more in return, sign the extension before he is traded over. So Robertson is one winger out there that I really think could be of value to the Canes. So we'll see if the Stars knuckle under and move on from him, because it's probably not likely, but that would be my favorite move.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Robertson, okay, yeah, sure. I'm concerned with his foot speed and some other things, but he had 96 points last year and 45 goals, so I think I can live with him. Yeah, he's a heck of a player. There's no question. Anyone on your radar, Erin?
Well, I know you and I talked about Matthew Nyes a little bit when we last talked, and I still think, is he an ideal fit for the Carolina Hurricanes? Not necessarily, but he does bring another more of that power forward game, and I think it would be nice for them to have that, especially because, again, I'm looking at the future. He's still a very young player. He's still got a lot of years left to play that game. Eventually, the Canes are going to need someone to take up the Taylor Hall spot next to Stankoven and Blake. Right now, Hall is great. He's doing a great job there. But we know his age, and we know that certain times players will start to fall off, at different rates. You don't know anybody over 30 33, 34, you start watching those years and seeing how they're doing. So Hall is definitely not somebody they're looking to replace right now. But if you brought in someone like Nyes, he would probably eventually slot in on that left side next to those two. And again, that power game is something that works well within what Rod Brind'Amour wants players to do. We've seen it with Svechnikov. You know, it's you're getting in there, forechecking hard, making life miserable for the guys that you're coming up against. I don't think Toronto's going to move him. I don't think there's much of a chance. I really don't think they would move him for a package like we're talking about. No. And I definitely don't think the Stars would move Robertson without, probably getting Stankoven back, which is a non-starter. Yeah. So.
And you know what? I think you're right too, Erin. I mean, these are great players. We'd love to have them, but I don't see either one of those players leaving their teams. That seems to be more of the standard now. And that's a great segue into the RFA offer sheet thing. I thought we'd spend a minute or two on this because it probably doesn't demand much more than that. Some teams jumping off. We heard Barrett Hayton with New Jersey. He signed back with Utah. Leo Carlsson, the big noisy, offer from the Flyers was matched today by Anaheim. Pavel Mintyukov, there were rumors the Canes were actually sniffing at a possible offer sheet for him. He signed back with Anaheim before anything happened. And the one that we keep hearing is Simon Edmundson. That's something thrown against the wall by Elliot Friedman. That's foolish. There's no way they're letting Edmundson go. They've got lots of cap space. He's staying with them. And the same thing with Adam Fantilli. If you start to think he might be a future Cane, forget it. So all of these guys, it's not, there's going to be no movement on the RFAs in my mind. Has anybody got any thoughts other than that?
I think Carolina's become pretty good at weaponizing the threat of an offer sheet. Sure. They if there is a player that they want that is an RFA that is offer sheet eligible, they will tell the team, you know what, we want to trade you for this player. We're coming here with a fair offer. If you decide you don't want to accept our offer, we will explore the possibility of offer sheeting them. And it's, just because teams have space and can match. I mean, Anaheim had space and they matched Carlson like we were talking about earlier. $18 million a year for 5 years. They have Cutter Gauthier to re-sign. Sure. They have Beckett Seneke coming up. They've blown their salary structure, and it's going to get harder and harder for them to fill the depth spots within the next few years. They're going to be in the same boat that Edmonton has been in all these years with McDavid and Draisaitl. So the fact that the Canes are willing to make those offers, it's not that the team might not be able to match, but if you make the offer cleverly enough, you're talking about putting them in a real cap situation down the line. You can match it today. Well, what about next year when you've got these three guys you've got to re-sign, And that's, I think, the kind of thing that they're doing. And as far as with Simon Edmundson, the reason I think they've explored that is because they don't know, Detroit doesn't know what's going to happen as far as what they're going to end up doing with Larkin once they move him. They're going to have to bring in more people. They're going to have cap space for that. Yeah. Well, if you tie up too much money in your defense, then how are you going to replace Larkin? You're not going to have the cap space to sign somebody. So I think it's interesting to me that Tulsky's willing to do this and play these games because he's using them in a way that teams haven't traditionally used them. And we know that this because we know he did this with Keandre Miller. He told them, if you won't give us a player, we're going to offer, and New York wouldn't have been able to match that. So, I think that's where the speculation comes from. I think that's where you get these insiders talking about the Canes might do this, the Canes might do that. I do think that they want teams to be aware that they have this in their back pocket and will use it. So that's interesting. It's a change from how business has been done in the past. Oh, sure, for sure. And I mean, St. Louis did it a couple of years ago. I mean, it's not anything new. I mean, they got a couple of pretty good players, Broberg and Holloway, that from the Oilers, and they're both key players for St. Louis now. For sure, the Canes are in on everything. I mean, that's the reality. That anything that's going on of any relevance, Eric Tulsky's talking to them, and most times he's just talking. You heard about You heard about the possibility that they had floated that the Canes might have used an offer sheet as a way of negotiating between two other teams. And that was an interesting idea. If they ever do that, that loophole will probably get closed. But that's That's a really clever way to go about, okay, you can't afford to offer sheet the player, but you want him. We'll offer sheet him for you and trade him to you for this consideration back that is perfectly fine with us, even though it doesn't match the offer sheet considerations. That would if anybody ever does that, that would be brilliant. So,
well, don't forget, I mean, there's very few general managers who have the wizardry of Eric Tulsky. I mean,
absolutely.
He's brilliant. So he concocts this stuff. I mean, he's done a number of things, as we know, with contracts and other things where he's created he's done very creative things that nobody else could do, and he's doing it again. He's always trying to find a way to maximize the return for the Canes. So with that, heading to closing thoughts, do we think the Canes run with their current team this year? And if so, do we feel good about it? Katie?
I think so. Like we talked about before, Nikishin's really the only question mark at this point. So I have a feeling they're going to say, this is the group we won with. They want to be here. They're Canes. Let's give them a shot. Let's see what they can do. Let's see if they can run this back. Let's see if Bussy can be a starter or at least a long-term tandem partner with Kochetkov. Let's see if Piotr has bounced back from his injury and has regained the form we know he's capable of. Let's see what we get out of Stankoven now that he's got a full season under his belt at center and has built that confidence, what he is able to produce over the long term. Was what happened at the end of last season in the playoffs just a flash in the pan, just a really good hot streak that he had, or is this something that he is able of sustaining long term, him and his line, of course? Just lots of possibilities, lots of interesting nuance that I think the Canes will just say, hey, let's give them a shot. And if they're able to run it back, then let's defend this title with the group that brought us.
I agree. Erin?
I always hold out the possibility that there will be a late summer move, because I think that the Canes have had a tendency to do that, especially when they have, I mean, even without moving anybody out, they have around $11 million in cap space. Mm-hmm. That's without making the obvious moves, trading Kotkaniemi, maybe trading Nikishin. They still have $11 million in cap. And they're not going to use, even if they sign Nikishin, they're definitely not using all of it.
No.
So, and I'm still ambivalent about that, like I said. But I think that it wouldn't surprise me if they were to pull off one of those kind of late August moves that has the, journalists scrambling because there, finally is something to talk about before you get into the preseason. And it'll be close to the preseason this year because preseason's early this year. So I don't think they're ever really satisfied. I think they're always looking for those players that can make the team a little bit better. And they continue to do that in the year, too. It's not like it's going to stop because the preseason is over. Mm-hmm. I mean, but ideally, if you're going to bring in, let's say you're going to bring in a goaltender. Let's say you're going to bring in, a winger like Tom was talking about. Ideally, you want those players on the roster for the opening day of preseason. You want them on the roster for the opening day of training camp, because we all know it's a key factor for the Canes that getting players up to speed does not happen all that easily when they come in at the trade deadline. So I think there'll be a move. I don't know what it'll be, but I think there'll be a move before we get to the end of the summer. I think it'll be something that we will be talking about here. But maybe that's just wishful thinking. I don't know. For the most part, I think we like our group territory, or as people are saying these days on the internet, we like our champs. So
yes.
The one thing I will say, though, is at the trade deadline last year, they ended up with cap space. Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's kind of a changing time a little bit with Eric. He's being very selective in what he wants to do, and it better be the right move in his mind. Mm-hmm. As we know, he's gotten to the point where he's pretty well identified the players that can play for the Hurricanes.
Yes.
Like he's got it down to a fine science. He's a scientist, so it makes sense. But he's got it down to a fine science, right? He knows exactly what the Canes need. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And unless he gets the deal that he thinks is right, or deals, they don't happen.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, not a lot to talk about in terms of moves. I think there's some different ideas, some different thoughts that we can play with here. But it's the dog days of summer. And it could be that Eric's going to take some vacation. I'm not sure he ever does, but it could be that Eric's going to take a little vacation and we won't hear much for a while. And certainly it's happened right around the league. There's virtually nothing happening. I mean, zero in terms of signings or anything else. So very, very quiet. And I expect it'll stay that way for the coming weeks for sure until we get closer into August and some of that time takes place. So anyway, as always, great to talk Carolina Hurricanes hockey, ladies. It's been a riot, and I'm not sure we solved anything today, but it was certainly great fun. And for those of you who have been watching or listening, of course, we're delighted you spent time with us. If you like this episode, please press the like button. If you have questions or comments, please put those in the comments section. And if you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker and hear more from these great ladies, please press the subscribe and the bell buttons, and we'll make sure you're alerted just as soon as they're available. As always, thank you so much for spending time with us, and we look forward to getting together with you real soon right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes you need. Storm Tracker.